Sparkle's introduction, A World Beyond Fear. Imagine this: you are standing at the edge of your own life, looking back at all the years behind you. How much of your journey was shaped by fear? The fear of failing, the fear of losing someone you love, the fear of being judged, and perhaps the deepest fear of all, the fear of not being enough. We live in a time where fear has become the hidden architect of our choices. It whispers when we hesitate to take a new job. It tightens our chest when we think about our children's future. It creeps into our minds when we lie awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, asking, what if? But here is the gift of the Buddha's teachings. Fear is not a prison without keys. For over 500 years, millions have walked this path and discovered ways not only to manage fear, but to transform it into wisdom, compassion, and freedom. Today, I want to walk with you through 6 Buddhist lessons on letting go of fear, not as a teacher lecturing a student, but as a friend who has also stumbled, struggled, and slowly learned to breathe again. My hope is that by the end of this journey, you will not only understand fear differently, but also feel lighter, freer, and perhaps even a little braver. So, let us begin with the first lesson, a truth as old as the rising and setting sun. Lesson 1, Embrace Impermanence, Cherry Blossom. Impermanence is not some distant philosophy reserved for monks in mountain temples. It's woven into every corner of our lives. We see it every day, but rarely pause to notice. A sunrise that feels eternal in its beauty is gone within minutes, replaced by a softer light. The steam rising from your morning coffee vanishes before you finish the cup. A child's laughter in the backyard echoes like forever, then dissolves into silence. Impermanence is the backdrop to everything, yet our struggle with it is what gives birth to fear. Fear often comes from our attempt to freeze what cannot be frozen: our health, our relationships, our possessions, even our identity. We panic at the thought of change because deep down we believe things should remain as they are. But clinging to permanence in a world built on change is like trying to trap a river in a glass jar. The harder you grip, the more it slips through your fingers. Letting go of the fear begins when we recognize that change is not the enemy. It is the rhythm of life itself. Think of sidewalk chalk art after a summer block party. On Saturday, children filled the pavement with rocket ships, hopscotch squares, and their names in bold colors. By Monday, a single summer rain has blurred the edges into soft pastels sliding toward the drain. For many parents, the fading image sparks a pang of loss. Why can't this moment last? But the truth is, the beauty of chalk is that it was meant to be temporary. Its fading is not a betrayal, it is part of the story. Life is like that chalk drawing. We cherish it most when we understand it will not remain. Or imagine a favorite baseball glove used season after season. At first, it's stiff, resistant. But with time, the leather softens, darkens, collects wrinkles. Its very imperfection becomes its value. It finally fits the hand perfectly. If you demanded it stay brand new, it could never catch anything. The wear itself makes it alive. In the same way, our own aging bodies are not failures. They are testaments to lives fully lived. When we stop fearing change, tenderness takes the place of terror. Nature repeats the lesson again and again. A puddle reflects the sky in the morning like a flawless mirror, then shrinks to a dark coin by afternoon heat. A row of geese cuts across the sky, reshaping the air, and then disappears. A sandcastle built with devotion is wiped away by the tide, not to punish the builder, but to offer a fresh canvas for the next creation. If we only mourn what is gone, we miss the gift. Impermanence is how the universe makes space for new beginnings. Fear thrives on the illusion of forever. What if this anxiety never ends? What if this grief never fades? What if this uncertainty is permanent? But impermanence whispers a different truth. Nothing stays as it is, not your joy, not your sadness, not your fear. Even your own breath proves it. Inhale, then exhale. That cycle is the most intimate evidence that everything rises, passes, and transforms. By grounding yourself in that truth, you begin letting go of the fear moment by moment. There's something deeply human in watching growth marks on a child's doorframe. Each pencil line, year after year, shows not just what's lost, but what's been lived. We ache at the passing, but we also see gratitude etched into wood. Change contains both grief and gift, and only by embracing both do we step into real courage. The next time fear grips you, pause and name one thing that is shifting right now: the light in the room, the sound around you, even your own breath. Whisper gently, "This too shall pass," not as a cold dismissal, but as a loving reminder that everything, including your fear, is temporary. When you open your heart to that truth, life no longer feels like a battle to preserve, but a river worth stepping into. Lesson 2. See through the illusion of fear. New moon. Fear has a way of convincing us that it is solid, that it has weight and teeth. But most of the time, fear is a shadow cast by our imagination. It looks terrifying on the wall, yet when you turn on the light, you realize there was never anything there. Seeing through the illusion of fear is one of the most liberating lessons Buddhism offers, and it is also one of the most practical steps toward letting go of the fear. Think of a child who hears the creak of an old house at night. To their mind, it becomes a monster lurking in the hallway. But when the parent switches on the lamp, the sound is revealed as nothing more than the wooden beams shifting with the weather. The fear felt real, the heart raced, the body tensed, but the threat was only a story in the mind. As adults, we do the same thing. A performance review at work becomes, in our thoughts, a sign of failure. A late-night phone call becomes a disaster before we even pick up. The mind rehearses catastrophe and the body believes it. Fear feeds on what-ifs. What if I fail? What if they leave me? What if I'm not enough? Notice how rarely these questions are about what is happening in the present moment. They are nearly always projections into a future that hasn't arrived. It's like mist rising off a field in the early morning. Thick, disorienting, making the world appear smaller and more dangerous. But when the sun climbs higher, the mist dissolves and the reality of wide, open space is revealed. The fear was never the field, it was only the fog. Consider the way we react to shadows at dusk. A tree branch sways against a streetlight and the shape looks like a figure standing still. Your breath quickens, your steps speed up, until you realize it's just the wind moving leaves. The fear response is genuine, but the object was never there. In the same way, much of what we fear never actually materializes. Studies even show that the majority of the scenarios people worry about never come true. Fear is a storyteller, and often it's a poor one. Nature gives us another gentle metaphor: the ripple on a pond. Toss a pebble in and the surface trembles. If you mistake the ripples for something dangerous, you might think the whole pond is unstable. But when you step back, you see the truth. It was only a small stone, and the water will settle on its own. Our thoughts are like that. A single anxious idea can ripple through the mind, but it doesn't mean the whole of life is under threat. When we recognize the illusion, calm naturally returns. Letting go of the fear doesn't mean denying its presence. It means facing it with awareness and compassion, seeing it clearly for what it is, a thought, not a fact. Imagine fear as a cloud drifting across the sky. If you stare too long, you might think the cloud is permanent, blocking the sun forever. But clouds move, the skies clear, and the sun remains. When you bring mindfulness to fear, you see that it too will pass. One of my closest friends once shared a simple practice she uses when anxiety begins to spiral. She asks herself, is this fear describing the present or predicting the future? Most of the time, the answer is predicting, and predictions are not truths. By separating story from reality, she found a way to breathe again. That's the power of awareness. It pulls us out of the movie in our head and back into the real scene unfolding around us. The next time fear rises, pause and write it down. Put the words on paper. I'm afraid I'll fail this exam. Then ask, is this happening right now, or is this only a story in my mind? In that simple act, you hold the fear up to the light. You will often discover it was nothing more than a shadow, thinner than smoke. With practice, you'll begin letting go of the fear, not by fighting it, but by seeing it for what it really is. An illusion. Lesson 3. Cultivate mindfulness. Person in lotus position. Fear is clever. It doesn't live in the present. It hides in the shadows of the past and the fog of the future. We replay mistakes and feel regret. We imagine disasters that haven't happened and feel panic. But right here in this moment, fear struggles to survive. That is the quiet power of mindfulness. It anchors us in what is real, stripping fear of its disguise and guiding us gently toward letting go of the fear. Think of a musician tuning a guitar. When their mind is scattered, the strings buzz, the notes clash, and the music feels restless. But when they breathe, focus, and place their ear close, the right pitch emerges and harmony returns. Our own minds are like that instrument. Fear makes us sharp or flat, tugging us off balance. Mindfulness is the act of listening carefully, turning the peg slowly, and bringing ourselves back into tune with the present moment. I once knew a gardener who worked in a small community park. Every morning before planting or pruning, he paused to kneel on the soil, running his fingers through the earth. "This moment tells me what the plants need," he said. He wasn't rushing to finish the job, he was entering it fully. On days when storms threatened his work or drought left the soil cracked, he still found calm, not by ignoring fear of failure, but by grounding in what was right in front of him. The soil, the air, the living green. That was his mindfulness practice, and it freed him from being paralyzed by worry. Mindfulness doesn't ask you to erase your fears. It asks you to notice them as they arrive without judgment. Imagine you're standing by a river. Thoughts float past like leaves on the current. One leaf says, "What if I fail?" Another says, "What if I'm not loved?" If you chase every leaf, you end up drowning in the water. But if you step back and simply watch, you realize you are not the leaves, not the river. You are the awareness that sees it all. And in that awareness, fear loses its grip. There is also a physical side to mindfulness. Fear doesn't just whisper in the mind, it tightens the chest, quickens the breath, sends heat rushing through the body. Most of us resist these sensations, trying to escape or numb them. But mindfulness invites curiosity. Sit quietly and feel the heartbeat racing. Notice the warmth in your palms. Watch the breath rise and fall. As you stay present with the body, you realize the sensations are not permanent storms. They are passing weather. Just as a summer thundercloud rumbles and then clears, the body's fear signals will dissolve if we don't feed them with panic. Think about walking barefoot on a beach at dawn. At first, the sand feels cold and damp. Then, as the sun rises and your steps continue, the sand warms beneath your feet. The beach didn't change in an instant. It shifted gradually, moment by moment. Our inner world is the same. By staying present, we witness change happening inside us. Mindfulness teaches us to trust that shift instead of fearing we're stuck forever. One simple practice I often share is mindful breathing. Not the kind of shallow breath we do when fear takes over, but a conscious inhale and a long, steady exhale. Try this. Inhale slowly, imagining courage filling your body. Exhale gently, picturing fear dissolving like smoke into the sky. Even 3 mindful breaths can reset the nervous system, giving you space between the fear and your response. That space is where wisdom enters. Mindfulness also opens the door to gratitude. When we are present, we notice details we usually overlook. The warmth of sunlight on the skin, the sound of a friend's voice, the rhythm of our own heart. Gratitude softens fear because it reminds us of what is steady and nourishing in this very moment. You cannot be deeply grateful and deeply afraid at the same time. The two cannot coexist in the same breath. The next time fear visits, pause for 3 breaths. Name what you feel in your body: tightness, racing thoughts, heat. Then shift your focus outward. What can you see? What can you hear? What can you touch? Anchor yourself in those details. In doing so, you'll discover the truth. Fear belongs to the past and the future, but peace is always waiting in the present. And the more you return to that present, the more natural letting go of the fear becomes. Lesson 4. Understand the nature of suffering fire. One of the Buddha's most profound insights is simple but hard to swallow. Suffering is universal. No one escapes it. Fear, in particular, is one of suffering's sharpest edges. It shows up in the pit of the stomach before a hard conversation, in the sleepless nights before a medical test, in the hollow silence when someone we love walks away. But the truth is, fear isn't a flaw in you. It's part of the human condition. Recognizing this truth doesn't make the pain disappear, but it does lighten the loneliness that often makes fear unbearable. Think of a crowded airport during a thunderstorm. Flights are delayed, people are restless, children cry, and the departure boards flash red with the word "canceled." In that moment, frustration and fear ripple through the crowd. Yet if you look closely, every single person is enduring the same uncertainty. Some bury their heads in books, others pace. Others laugh nervously, but all are waiting, all are caught in the same storm. That's what fear is like, deeply personal in how it feels, but utterly common in how it arises. Understanding this universality changes the way we hold our fear. Instead of thinking, "Why me?" we can remember this too belongs to everyone. That shift doesn't erase the fear, but it loosens the grip of shame. It takes us out of isolation and back into belonging. Nature shows us this lesson with clarity. Imagine a forest after a wildfire. Blackened trunks stand like charred bones, and at first it looks like devastation without end. But look again in the months that follow, and you'll see shoots of green pushing through the ash. The fire brought suffering to every tree. It was not selective, but it also cleared space for renewal. Fear is like that wildfire. It burns through all of us at one time or another. But in recognizing its universality, we discover that we are not broken, we are simply alive. I once sat with a friend in a hospital waiting room while his mother underwent surgery. His hands trembled, his knee bounced. He whispered, "I feel weak for being this afraid." I gently pointed to the rows of families around us, each wearing the same expression of worry. "Look," I said, "fear is not weakness, it's a sign of love. Every person here feels it too." He looked around and I saw his shoulders relax. His fear didn't vanish, but it no longer felt like a personal failure. It felt like part of being human. This is what Buddhist teaching calls dukkha, suffering woven into life itself. When we accept that suffering and fear are not punishments but conditions we all share, we stop fighting them as enemies. We begin to study them instead, to learn from them. And through that, we start letting go of the fear, not by erasing it, but by refusing to believe it makes us alone or defective. Think of the ocean. Every wave that crashes onto the shore looks distinct, but all waves are part of the same water. Your fear may feel unique, but it rises from the same ocean of human experience. And like the tide, it will eventually recede. The next time fear arrives, try this. Close your eyes and picture thousands of other people around the world at that exact moment. Someone waiting for exam results, someone worried about rent, someone pacing before a job interview. Whisper silently, may they be free from fear. May we all be free. In that act of compassion, your fear joins a larger story, and the heaviness begins to soften. By understanding the nature of suffering, we discover connection where fear once built walls. And in that connection, courage quietly grows. Lesson 5, let go of attachment, dove. If fear had a best friend, it would be attachment. Fear grows strongest wherever we cling the hardest, whether it's to a relationship, a job, a reputation, or even to the version of ourselves we believe we must always be. The Buddha taught that craving, or tanha, is like thirst that never ends. The tighter we grip, the more fragile we feel. Letting go of the fear then begins with loosening that grip. Think of someone holding a balloon. At first, it's a joy bobbing in the breeze. But the moment the thought arises, what if it slips away? The hand clenches, the joy fades, replaced by tension. Ironically, the very act of clutching risks popping the balloon. Life is like that. The more we try to lock things down, the more anxious we become about losing them. Attachment also shows up in small, ordinary ways. Maybe you've kept an old pair of jeans in the closet for years, telling yourself, one day I'll fit into them again. Every time you see them, a pinch of fear arises. Fear of change, fear of not measuring up, fear of loss. Yet those jeans are not your identity, they are just fabric. Releasing them, passing them on, or simply accepting they've served their time can feel like dropping a weight you didn't know you carried. Nature offers the same wisdom. Think of autumn trees. If the branches refuse to release their leaves, the new buds of spring would never appear. The tree doesn't mourn the loss, it trusts the cycle. We too must learn that by letting go of what we cling to, we make space for renewal. Our fear lessens when we realize we don't need to control every leaf. I once knew a man who inherited a box of delicate glassware from his grandmother. He locked it in a cabinet, terrified something might break. For years, he never used the glasses, never let them hold wine, water, or even light. One day, a crack appeared anyway, just from age. He laughed then, realizing that in trying so hard to protect them, he'd never enjoyed them. That laughter was freedom, the recognition that nothing was ever truly his to preserve. Attachment doesn't mean caring, it means confusing possession with permanence. When we attach our happiness to outcomes, I must get this job, this relationship must last, I must never change, we create a fragile cage for ourselves. Fear rattles the bars every time uncertainty appears. But when we practice non-attachment, we discover a paradox. We can love more deeply, work more passionately, and live more fully, precisely because we are not chained by the outcome. Picture the ocean tide. If you try to hold the waves with your hands, you'll come up with only foam. But if you step into the tide and let it move around you, you feel the true power and beauty of the water. Life is the same. When we stop trying to trap it, we finally experience it. Letting go of attachment doesn't mean apathy. It doesn't mean we stop loving, creating, or dreaming. It means we stop demanding that love, creation, or dreams obey our script. It means replacing grasping with gratitude. Gratitude says, I am thankful for this moment as it is, even if it changes tomorrow. That posture dissolves fear because fear is rooted in the fantasy of control. Practice. Choose one small thing you've been gripping too tightly. Maybe it's an object, a plan, or an expectation of someone you love. For one day, experiment with loosening your hold. If it shifts, let it. If it stays, enjoy it without clutching. Notice how your body feels lighter, freer. Each time you release even a little, you are training your heart in letting go of the fear. In the end, attachment whispers that without control, we are unsafe. But the truth is the opposite. Safety is found in openness, like autumn leaves floating down, like balloons rising into the sky. Freedom comes not from holding on, but from letting go. Lesson 6. Cultivate patience, seedling. Fear often grows in the soil of impatience. We want answers now, results now, certainty now. When life delays, we panic. When the future feels hidden, our minds start filling in the blanks with frightening stories. But cultivating patience, the Buddhist virtue of Kanti, is like planting strong roots in shifting ground. It steadies us when fear would otherwise sweep us away. Think of a seed. You can water it, tend it, and even whisper encouragement, but no amount of rushing will make it sprout overnight. It needs darkness, time, and seasons. Impatience says, why isn't it growing yet? Patience says, it is growing even if I can't see it. Fear thrives when we demand quick resolutions. Patience dissolves fear by reminding us that life unfolds at its own rhythm. I once watched a friend train for a marathon. In the early weeks, he wanted to quit. His lungs burned, his legs felt heavy, and every mile seemed impossible. Fear told him you'll never make it to the finish line, but he kept showing up day by day, step by step. Over months, the very thing he once dreaded became his strength. The race wasn't won in a burst of speed, it was won in the patient accumulation of steady effort. Fear had no foothold once he trusted the process. Nature is fluent in patience. Consider a canyon carved by a river. The rock looks immovable, yet drop by drop. Year after year, water shapes stone. If the river tried to rush, it could do nothing. Its power is in persistence. Fear tells us change must happen immediately or not at all. Patience reminds us even the hardest landscapes yield to steady presence. Impatience makes us reactive. We fear uncertainty because we want to control what happens next. But life is not a machine that follows our commands. It is more like the weather. You can prepare for rain, but you cannot force the sun. Cultivating patience is like carrying an umbrella. It doesn't stop the storm, but it keeps you steady until it passes. And when you realize storms always pass, you begin letting go of the fear that you'll be trapped forever. Patience also applies inward. Many of us are harsh with ourselves. Why am I still anxious? Why can't I just move on? Why am I not better yet? This self-judgment only multiplies fear. But when we approach ourselves with patience, we give space to grow. A child learning to walk falls countless times, but no one scolds the child for failing. We cheer for the attempt. Why not offer the same gentleness to ourselves? Every stumble is part of the path, not proof of weakness. I remember standing in line at a grocery store where the cashier was moving slowly. The man ahead of me grew restless, sighing loudly, tapping his foot. By the time he left, his face was red with frustration. But the woman behind me smiled softly and said, "It's okay. This is just 5 minutes of our life." She was right. Patience didn't just spare her from anger. It kept fear of lost time from stealing her peace. In that small moment, patience was freedom. When fear urges you to rush, whether it's pressing for results, clarity, or change, pause and take 3 slow breaths. Imagine roots growing down from your feet into the earth, holding you steady. Say quietly, I will trust the unfolding. I do not need to know everything right now. Notice how this softens the edge of urgency. Over time, this practice transforms fear from a command into a passing wave. Patience is not passivity. It is not about giving up or doing nothing. It is about moving with life's tempo, trusting that every step, even the slow ones, matters. Fear shrinks when we stop demanding certainty at every turn. By cultivating patience, we discover resilience, calm, and the courage to wait for life to bloom in its own season. Conclusion: walking beyond fear, sunrise over mountains. Fear will never vanish completely. It is part of being alive. But through these 6 lessons, embracing impermanence, seeing fear as illusion, cultivating mindfulness, understanding suffering, letting go of attachment, and practicing patience, we learn to walk with fear differently. Instead of letting fear chain us, we let it teach us. Instead of running, we breathe. Instead of clinging, we release. And in that space, something extraordinary appears: freedom. So I ask you, dear friend, which of these 6 lessons speaks most deeply to your heart today? Share it in the comments. I would love to hear your journey. And if this video touched you, please like, subscribe, and join our growing community here at Infinite Buddhist Teachings. Together, we can learn not only to let go of the fear, but also to embrace the courage, peace, and wisdom that lie beyond it. Thank you for walking this path with me. May you be free, may you be fearless, may you be at peace, folded hands.